single bark chattered the usual hum of Terminal 4, not near an abandoned suitcase or a loud passenger, but at a child's pink backpack. What followed unraveled a truth no scanner could have caught, and no one dared imagine. This isn't just a story about a dog. It's about instinct, silence, and the thin line between normal and nightmare. If stories like this stay with you, like they stay with me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks animals don't understand more than we ever say out loud. The departure lounge of Portsmouth International Airport always smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel, a strange comfort to Officer Anya Linford. She had been with airport security for 3 years now, long enough to grow familiar with its subtle rhythms, its cast of recurring passengers, and the quiet tugs of instinct that occasionally stirred her gut. Today began no differently. The early flights had cleared and the mid-morning lull gave the illusion of calm. Shadow, her canine partner, trotted beside her with his usual focus, black coat glossy under the fluorescent lights, nose twitching with each passing traveler. They had patrolled this same Terminal B 100 times before, checking for anomalies, scanning body language and trusting that if something were off, Shadow would know before she did. It wasn't the hurried business traveler with a metal briefcase that caught Shadow's attention, nor the teenage backpackers arguing over check-in times. It wasn't the unattended duffel bag left near the vending machine either. Shadow sniffed once, circled it, and moved on. What made him stop, what made his body freeze mid-step, was a little girl. Or more precisely, her backpack. She stood just outside Gate 23, barely reaching the hip of the man beside her. She wore a gray hoodie zipped up to her chin, and her sneakers were scuffed like they had walked too far in a short time. But it was the backpack that caught Shadow. Pale lavender, shaped like a rounded star, with silver patches and a small dangling charm of a smiling moon. It looked like something bought from a mall kiosk, innocuous, adorable. Yet Shadow stiffened, his posture straightened, head tilted, ears focused. Then, without warning, he let out a short, tight whine, barely audible but sharp enough that Anya stopped walking. She followed his gaze. The girl didn't notice them at first. Her eyes were on the floor and her arms hugged the straps of the backpack like it was more than just something to carry crayons and snacks. The man beside her, maybe early 50s, salt and pepper beard, wore thin-rimmed glasses and a navy wool coat. He glanced up just as Anya approached, smiled. "Everything all right, officer?" he asked, voice smooth and friendly. Shadow sat down, emotion trained for heightened alert but not full threat. Anya's training kicked in. "Routine patrol. Your daughter's backpack got my partner's attention. Mind if I take a quick look?" The man chuckled softly, a practiced chuckle that felt a shade too light. "Of course, kids always sneak candy in without telling me. It's all hers, I assure you." He gently patted the girl's shoulder. "Say hi, Ellie." The girl glanced up for a fraction of a second, then back down again. Amy's eyes flicked between the man and the backpack. Something felt off, but nothing she could write down. The man offered their documents without being asked, which was uncommon. A passport, a flight itinerary to Gothenburg, Sweden, and a folded birth certificate. All matched, but the birth certificate, though seemingly valid, looked aged, edges worn. The ink on the name Ellie Vaughn a little too faded for a document supposedly issued just 8 years ago. Anya took the items, stepping slightly to the side while Shadow remained seated, eyes still fixed on the backpack. The girl, Ellie, barely moved. "Any old is she?" Anya asked. 8.5, turned in February, the man answered without hesitation. "We're heading to Sweden to visit my wife's mother. Ellie hasn't traveled much. She's nervous around crowds, hence the hoodie." He looked at Ellie again with a fatherly smile, though Ellie did not return it. Anya nodded, scanning the boarding pass. There was nothing technically wrong, and yet Shadow wasn't relaxing. Anya handed the documents back. "Appreciate your cooperation. Do you mind if we walk through a quick secondary screening? Shouldn't take more than a few minutes." The man smiled again, eyes crinkling. "Certainly, whatever keeps everyone safe." As they began walking toward the screening area, Anya couldn't shake the feeling. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't bark. But he stayed closer to the girl than usual, tail still, steps slow and measured. Inside the private screening room, Anya keyed in her badge and gestured to 2 chairs. The man sat immediately. Ellie hesitated, looking at Shadow. Then, almost imperceptibly, she moved closer to the dog and sat down cross-legged on the floor. The man seemed amused. "Looks like she's found a friend," he said. Anya offered a tight smile. She turned to her partner. "Shadow, check." The dog circled the backpack slowly. One sniff, two, and then he sat again. His signal for suspicion. Anya crouched down. "Ellie, can I ask what's inside your bag? Just books and snacks?" The girl didn't answer. The man leaned forward. "She's shy, always been. It's hard for her to talk to strangers. If you want to open the bag, go ahead, just—" He paused. "She gets upset if it breaks." That detail stuck. There had been no mention of the grandmother being alive earlier. Only that they were visiting her grave. If Anya remembered correctly, a tiny discrepancy. Not enough for probable cause, but enough to catalog. Anya's hand moved toward the zipper slowly. The girl suddenly gripped one strap tightly, not in defiance, but in fear. Her eyes flicked toward Shadow, then to Anya, then back again. No words. Just stillness. The man spoke again, softer this time. "Honestly, officer, is this necessary? You're scaring her." Anya straightened. "We'll just run it through the scanner, no need to worry." She picked up the backpack gently. As she did, Shadow gave a soft huff, not alarmed but still alert. She carried it toward the door, pausing just as she heard the man mutter something under his breath. She couldn't quite catch it. When she turned back, his face was composed, pleasant even. But Ellie was watching her now, and for the first time, something flickered across the girl's expression. Not fear, not confusion, relief. Anya set the lavender backpack on the scanner's conveyor belt, eyes on Shadow as he trailed her into the equipment bay. The moment she placed it down, Shadow sat and stared again, then slowly laid his body flat against the floor, front legs extended, head low, eyes locked on the bag. Anya's breath caught, her training flickering to the front of her mind. This wasn't his normal reaction to narcotics or explosives. No bark, no aggressive stance. Just this, a full-body drop, reserved for trace biological alerts. Not lethal per se, but serious. She stood still, watching him. Shadow's chest rose and fell steadily, but his muscles stayed tense, his nose twitching in tight patterns. He sniffed again, then pressed his head a fraction closer to the floor, as if trying to track something through layers of fabric and metal. Anya turned to the technician. "Run a soft X-ray, don't open anything yet, and log it under Shadow Alpha 2. The tech gave her a quick nod, fingers already moving across the control panel. Back in the screening room, the man, Henry Vaughn as the passport said, sat calmly, legs crossed, hands folded in his lap like someone waiting for a haircut. Not a high-security inspection. He looked up with a polite smile as Anya re-entered. "Is everything all right?" Anya sat opposite him, letting the silence hang just long enough to invite discomfort. "Tell me again where you're headed," she asked, voice even. He blinked once, feigning confusion. "Gothenburg, Sweden. Visiting Ellie's grandmother, my late wife's mother." His tone carried a practiced softness, like he'd told this story before. Anya tilted her head slightly. "Terminal B flights to Gothenburg departed at 9:15. It's nearly 10:40. Your boarding pass says Gate 23, but Gate 23's next scheduled flight is to Edinburgh." She leaned back. "Would you like to clarify that?" His lips parted for a moment before curling back into a smile. "Oh, must have gotten the gate wrong. The app on my phone was glitching earlier. You know how these things are." He chuckled, tapping the side of his temple like the error was simply part of being human. Anya didn't smile. She was watching his hands now, slight tremor in the right index finger. Nervous, but not panicked. Practiced. She glanced at Ellie. The girl sat on the far edge of the bench, hands still clutching the sleeve of her hoodie, eyes fixed on the corner of the room where the fluorescent light flickered intermittently. "Ellie," Anya said gently, "do you know where you're going today?" The girl's head twitched slightly, but she didn't speak. She just blinked once, slow and steady. Anya turned back to Vaughn. "Do you travel often?" she asked. He gave a small nod. "Here and there. I'm in logistics, import and export. Ellie usually stays with my sister when I travel, but this time we thought it'd be good for her to come along." He gestured toward the backpack now being scanned. "This is her first big trip. She insisted on bringing that ridiculous thing. I said she'd be mistaken for a walking toy store. He laughed. Anya didn't. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. Import and export, you said. What's your primary route? He hesitated for half a second. Eastern Europe to the UK. Textiles mostly. Sometimes components for electronics. Another blink. Another lie maybe. Not wrong enough to flag but off like a too-smooth surface. In the equipment bay, the technician radioed back. Officer Linford, you'll want to see this. She stood immediately. I'll be right back, she said to Vaughn, not waiting for a reply. In the next room, the X-ray image glowed faintly on the monitor. Most of the contents looked normal. Snacks, a rolled-up jacket, a worn paperback, a half-empty water bottle. But beneath the fabric lining near the bottom, there was a rectangular shadow. Thin and flat. Denser than clothing, but not shaped like anything on the standard contraband list. Could be a case, the text said, but it's not shaped like any electronics. See the edges? Too clean. Anya stared at it for a long beat. Then she looked at Shadow. The dog had not moved. His ears were back now, tail still, eyes focused like a beam on the bag. He thinks it's biological, she murmured. The tech's face stiffened. That a live sample, unknown, Anya said. But he hasn't been wrong in 3 years. She returned to the room, this time holding a clipboard and a printout of the X-ray. Vaughn looked up, casual as ever, but there was a stiffness in his shoulders now, a tension in his neck just above the collar. She began, You're taking your daughter to Sweden. You say you're flying out of gate 23. That gate doesn't have a Sweden flight until tomorrow. The one for today left almost 90 minutes ago. But your boarding pass doesn't match either of those flights. Care to explain why? He paused. Well, maybe I downloaded an outdated itinerary. It happens. Snacks, art supplies, some old toys. I think she even packed that stuffed bear my wife gave her. He glanced at Ellie like she might back him up. She didn't. Anya shifted her attention. Ellie, she said softly, crouching now to the girl's level. Is there anything in your backpack that you didn't put there? The girl flinched. Henry cut in before she could say anything. Officer, I think this is getting excessive. I understand you're doing your job, but we're missing our flight. You weren't on any flight manifest this morning. Anya interrupted. Not from Terminal B, not from A or C. Your booking number is real, but it's for a reservation 3 days ago. You never boarded. That's not a glitch. That's deliberate. His expression didn't change, but the skin just beneath his eyes tightened. Anya straightened. Until I can verify who you are and why your daughter's bag triggered a level 2 biological alert, I need you to stay seated. Shadow finally stood. No growl, no bark, just motion. Smooth, calculated. He walked to Anya's side, then sat again. Eyes never leaving the man. Vaughn didn't blink. I think I'd like to call my lawyer now. You'll get your chance, Anya said calmly. The man's foot tapped once, then stopped. His gaze slid toward the exit, then to Ellie, then back to Anya. She watched it all, logged every tick, every beat. In the silence that followed, a subtle sound echoed down the corridor. The squeak of rubber soles against the polished tile floor. 2 more officers were approaching. Vaughn heard it too. He crossed his legs again, this time the other way, trying to play it calm. But his hands had started to sweat, and in the hallway outside the air was shifting. Something in the routine had cracked, and Anya knew. This was no ordinary father-daughter trip. This was something else. Something they hadn't yet unpacked. Not fully, not out loud, not yet. Anya adjusted the light above the inspection table, pulling on a pair of gloves as the lavender backpack was placed gently on the stainless steel surface. It looked even smaller now, almost absurd in the sterile environment of the secondary screening room. The dangling charm still swayed slightly from motion, catching the light like something out of place. Shadow stood just behind her. Ears high, tail low, body coiled but calm. He had stopped vocalizing, but he hadn't stepped away either. His eyes remained locked on the bag like it might move on its own. Anya began with the obvious, unzipping the main compartment slowly, methodically, careful not to startle Ellie, who was now sitting quietly near the corner of the room, her legs tucked beneath her, hurdy sleeves pulled over her hands. Henry Vaughn sat in his chair again, arms crossed, trying to reclaim a sense of composure, though the thin sheen of sweat on his upper lip betrayed him. Inside the main pocket were the usual suspects. A slightly squashed juice box, a packet of colored markers, a frayed paperback with creased pages, a folded pink sweater, and a small stuffed animal that might once have been a dog, though the fur was so worn it was hard to tell. Anya carefully removed each item, setting them to the side in a neat row, glancing periodically at Shadow, who remained eerily still. She unzipped the front pouch next. Crumbs of some kind, probably crackers, and a few stickers floated loose in the fabric lining. Nothing sharp, nothing dangerous, nothing wrong. She looked at Shadow. No growl, no tail movement. Then she gently turned the bag over, laying the backside flat against the table. Shadow's ears twitched. He moved, not toward the side she was inspecting, but toward the other edge of the table. He circled. Once, then again. On the third loop he paused at the far corner, sat, and stared. Anya narrowed her eyes. "All right," she muttered. She tapped the bottom lining with her knuckles. It sounded flat, just fabric over padding, but something about the stitching seemed off, a little too clean. The border of the base had a slight ripple as if it had been re-sewn recently. She lifted the bag again, tilting it slightly. Shadow stood, approached, sniffed low along the edge, then lay down again. Body pressed flat to the tile, nose aligned with the base of the bag. That was his silent signal. Not a threat, not a false positive, but something was wrong inside that bottom layer. Anya straightened. "We've got a double lining." The technician standing nearby stepped forward. "Want me to cut it open?" "No," she said quickly. "We document it first. Full photo set. Then a careful probe. If Shadow's reading biologicals, we don't risk exposure." The tech nodded and grabbed the camera from the cart. Clicks echoed as they documented every angle, every seam. Shadow didn't move. He just watched. Meanwhile, Anya glanced back at Ellie. The girl hadn't shifted since entering the room, but her eyes were now fixed on Shadow. There was a stillness in her face, not blankness but a quiet awareness. Her hands twisted together in her lap. Anya walked slowly over and knelt in front of her, leading a comfortable distance. "Ellie," she said softly, "I know it's scary in here. I don't want to make you upset. I just want to understand what's going on." No response. The girl blinked. Anya tried again. "Are you scared right now?" She didn't push, just let the question settle. Ellie's eyes shifted, first toward the bag, then toward Shadow. The dog, hearing his name in the air, flicked one ear toward them, but didn't break his stare. Ellie looked at him for a long second. Then, almost imperceptibly, she gave the faintest nod. Anya felt it, not just the motion but the message behind it. The girl wasn't just scared of the dog. She wasn't scared of something in the bag. Anya's heart beat a little faster. She stood and returned to the table. The tech had finished photographing. Anya reached for the small flat tool used for probing linings, then gently slid it into the seam along the bottom edge. Resistance. Not much, but just enough to confirm it was an empty space. Slowly, she pulled the seam wider. Not cutting, just revealing. A second layer of fabric peeled away from the base. Behind it, just visible, was something smooth and metallic. Not a toy, not a music box. A flat rectangle, wrapped tightly in duct tape. No markings, no wires visible, but too deliberate, too carefully concealed. Shadow huffed. Not a warning bark, just a breath, short and sharp. Anya paused. The room had fallen silent save for the hum of ventilation and the low buzz of fluorescent lights. The technician raised his voice a notch. "Should I call hazmat protocol?" "Not yet," Anya replied. "We need to confirm what it is. Could be nothing. Could be..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. They'd both seen enough to know this wasn't normal. She carefully stepped back from the table and looked at Vaughn. He hadn't moved, but his eyes had narrowed slightly, as if trying to calculate how much they'd found. Anya addressed him directly. "What's in the bottom of this backpack?" "I told you," he said slowly. "A music box. From her grandmother. You said earlier her grandmother was dead." His eyes didn't flinch. "That was my mother. Her maternal grandmother is still alive. We're going to..." Anya's voice didn't rise. "Gothenburg?" He nodded. "Flight out of gate 23? Another nod. "Except that flight doesn't exist today. And your bookings from 3 days ago. That's a lot of wrong gates and wrong dates, Mr. Vaughn." He leaned back in his chair. I'm not sure what you're implying, officer, but I think I'd like to speak with Airport Legal. You'll get your call, Anya said. But first, I need you to step out while we run the biological screening protocol. He made no move to argue. Instead, he turned to Ellie, voice dropping to a quieter pitch. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just stay calm. The words were smooth, but Anya caught something else. Ellie didn't look at him. Not once. Outside the door, the hallway had grown more active. Security officers were positioning discreetly, responding to the quiet alert Anya had triggered 15 minutes earlier. Inside, the metallic rectangle remained untouched in the bottom of the bag, waiting for verification. And Shadow, still lying flat beside the table, hadn't broken his stare. His body was still, but his breathing had shifted, slow and steady, like he was preparing for something even Anya couldn't see yet. The private inspection room felt colder than before, the thick glass windows sealed tight to the hallway outside, fluorescent lighting buzzing just above the line of comfort. Anya escorted Henry Vaughn and the girl into the space, her tone steady, her eyes constantly flicking between them and the lavender backpack that Shadow had now marked twice. As soon as they crossed the threshold, Vaughn turned slightly, positioning himself between Anya and the bag. His hand closed around one of the straps with quiet finality. I'd appreciate it, he said, voice smoother than necessary, if you didn't touch the backpack any further. Anya raised an eyebrow but didn't step forward. It's protocol, sir, you know that. He nodded, the gesture slow, deliberate. Understand, but it's important to her, that bag, it's from her mother. A birthday gift. Her last gift before she passed. If she sees you rifling through it or hears something was removed without her permission, she'll shut down. She's sensitive, she'll cry, she might scream, please. His grip on the strap remained firm. Anya stared at his hand for a beat longer than necessary, then met his eyes. You don't want to upset her, she said calmly. But I do need to finish the inspection, especially since your boarding credentials don't align with any outbound flights this morning. Across the hallway, in the ID verification terminal, a junior security agent named Maribel Torres leaned closer to the monitor in front of her. She'd been tasked with back-checking digital passenger files as part of a routine cross-scan, and had just pulled up Ellie Vaughn's passport. At first glance, it looked clean, issued 2 years ago in Boston, scanned in and verified digitally that morning. But as Mirabelle studied the photo, something tugged at her attention. She clicked to enlarge the image. The photo showed a younger version of the same girl. Rounded cheeks, lighter skin tone, straight golden brown hair hanging just past the collarbone. But something else stood out. The chin. The old photo had no scar, a faint detail just below the left side of the jaw. It should have been invisible, but the Ellie in the private inspection room had one, a small crescent-shaped scar, hard to miss once you were looking. And the hair, currently dark, almost black and cropped above her shoulders. Not dyed, it seemed, but naturally darker. That much change in 2 years? Possible, but uncommon, especially when paired with the other inconsistencies. Maribel reached for her intercom and requested a secondary match against facial recognition logs from the terminal's earlier cameras. Meanwhile, inside the inspection room, Vaughn had moved just slightly closer to the bag, enough to make Anya's instincts tighten. I understand your concern, she repeated carefully, but your story isn't adding up. The gate's wrong, the boarding pass is outdated, and now Shadow's indicating a concealed biological item in a compartment you never mentioned. Vaughn's shoulders stiffened. It's just a child's bag, he said, quieter now. Don't make this more than it is. Anya didn't respond. She turned to Ellie, kneeling again to her level, tone softening. Ellie, sweetheart, I know it's scary, I just want to help. Is there something in your backpack you're worried about? The girl didn't answer. She glanced at Shadow again, still silent, but her fingers had curled tightly around the fabric of her hoodie, knuckles white with pressure. Behind the glass, a new officer entered the control station with a tablet in hand. He knocked lightly on the room's door, signaling Anya. She excused herself, stepping outside but keeping the door propped slightly ajar. What is it? She asked. The officer handed over the tablet. Agent Torres flagged something strange with the passport ID. He tapped the screen, showing both images, the official photo and a freeze frame from 30 minutes ago. The comparison was striking. The bone structure was similar, but the newer image showed sharper cheekbones, darker eyes. And the scar, it's not a recent passport photo, issued 24 months ago. She would have been 6, maybe 7 in that image. That girl in there looks 9 or 10, Anya muttered. Or not hers. The officer nodded. Facial recognition match just finished. The child in the surveillance video was flagged in a missing persons report filed in Marseille 14 days ago. Ellie Duval, taken from school property after lunch. Witnesses saw her being led away by a man in glasses. Anya inhaled slowly, then let it go. Her documents list her as Ellie Vaughn, different surname. Your record of that name connected to her, and the man? He's used 4 aliases in the past 6 months, all connected to flights out of Europe. Send the images to Homeland, Anya ordered, and notify local CPD. We may be sitting on a Category 1 abduction. She turned back to the room where Vaughn had now taken a seat beside Ellie, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, fingers positioned like a net. She watched them for 3 beats, reading everything in his stillness. Back inside, Anya returned without comment. She didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, she resumed her inspection of the bag, this time from the side, fingertips tracing the seam beneath the false lining. There's a stitched double base here, she murmured, mostly to the tech now standing by with an extraction tray. Vaughn stood again. I've already told you, it's a private gift. Just, if it's nothing, Anya said evenly, then you won't mind us verifying that. The words had weight, but not hostility. Vaughn's hand tightened slightly on the bag strap, just enough for Anya to register the change in pressure. Ellie looked at Shadow again. The dog remained seated, silent and rigid, but his tail had started tapping lightly against the floor, not with excitement, but anticipation. Ellie's eyes flicked from Shadow to Anya, and then, for the first time, she opened her mouth slightly, as if to speak. But no sound came, only a quiet inhale. Then she turned her head ever so slightly away from Vaughn, just enough for Anya to see it, a tear rolling silently down her cheek. Anya held her breath, reading the signal like a whisper only she could hear. Something was hidden, not just inside the bag but between them, something fragile, and about to fracture. Anya didn't take her eyes off the child. The tear was gone now, but Ellie's expression had changed. It was no longer frozen or neutral. There was awareness in her look, and behind that, something deeper. Fear not of the dog nor even the officers, but of what might happen next if someone didn't act carefully. Anya caught that flicker, internalized it, and took a measured step back from the bag. She gave Shadow a subtle signal. 2 fingers pointed downward, and the dog moved in closer, one paw at a time until his nose hovered just above the exposed seam at the bottom lining. No bark followed, no growl. Instead, a sharp, high-pitched sound emerged from Shadow's throat. A hiss, or perhaps a restrained whine, but one Aya had only heard 3 times before, and every time it had meant one thing: the presence of human biological scent, recent and concentrated, not residual like blood or old tissue, not decomposed, something fresh, living. She froze in place. The technician beside her looked up sharply. That's his confirmation signal, right? For living, organic, she said barely above a whisper. Not food, not object, people. Shadow backed off then, pacing twice in a tight loop before resuming his rigid sit, tail flat to the floor. The technician, now far more alert, adjusted his gloves and motioned toward a locked drawer on the equipment cart. I'm grabbing the UV. Do it, Anya said. She didn't need to explain why. If Shadow was detecting a biological signature hidden within the backpack, and it wasn't on the items already unpacked, then it had to be embedded in the structure of the bag itself. The tech returned within seconds, flipping on the ultraviolet lamp, the beam cold and bluish fuchsia as it swept over the backpack's surface. The top compartments fluoresced normally, residue from a juice box, smudges from old stickers, but when he angled the light across the base, something strange happened. A single line of stitching along the underside lit up like a constellation. Thread so faint under natural light it appeared invisible, but under UV it glowed with a sickly green hue. That's not standard thread, he muttered, definitely reactive. Anya leaned in. If it was sewn in deliberately, that's not factory lining. Someone added that layer. Recently. The stitch pattern was tight, almost professional, but the irregularity in the thread density suggested a hurried job, or one not intended for scrutiny. She felt the breath in the room change, shallower, sharper. She looked at Vaughn, who had shifted subtly during the inspection, his body now angled toward Ellie protectively, but the muscles in his forearms were rigid. Anya stepped in. "We're opening the lining now." "No," Vaughn said immediately, standing. "That's not necessary, it's just reinforcement. We had it repaired last month." "Reinforced with chemical reactive thread." The question cut like a scalpel. "There's nothing dangerous in there," he insisted, voice strained now. "And it's not worth scaring her more than she already is. This whole thing is getting out of hand." Anya didn't respond to him. She looked at the tech. "Scalpel and probe now, stay shallow. We don't know what's in there." Vaughn stepped forward again, a half step too aggressive. Immediately, 2 airport officers behind the one-way mirror moved through the door and into the room, standing on either side of him. "You need to remain back, sir," one said with practiced calm. Vaughn didn't resist, but the pressure in the air thickened like steam in a closed room. Ellie hadn't moved from her seat, but her shoulders were higher now, drawn in tight as though bracing for some impact only she could predict. Her eyes darted briefly toward the bag, then to Shadow, then to the floor. She knew, that much was clear, and still not a single word had escaped her lips. The technician carefully inserted a scalpel along the glowing seam. The lining peeled back, and a second synthetic layer appeared beneath, darker than the lavender shell, stitched in with the same glowing thread. As he probed gently along the interior edge, his tool clicked against something hard. Metal. Flat, wide, not sharp like a blade but cold and firm. He pulled back with care and looked to Anya. "Need containment. This could be shielding. Bio or chemical. No way to know until we scan it. But if Shadow's signal is biological and the sense coming from here..." He didn't finish. Ayana stepped out to the hallway, issued an immediate request for the rapid containment team. She returned to find Shadow now standing, body angled slightly between Ellie and the table. Not aggressive, but alert, watching Vaughn more than the bag now. She took a slow breath. "We're escalating to full biological containment protocol," she said, directing it toward the officers, though she made sure Vaughn heard every word. He said nothing this time, just stared, his jaw flexed once, as if grinding something unspeakable behind his molars. Then Ellie moved, not dramatically, not loudly. She slid forward in her chair and placed one hand gently on Shadow's side. He didn't flinch. Instead, he pressed back into her touch ever so slightly. Anya watched it unfold, the smallest exchange of trust built without words. "Ellie," she said gently, stepping closer, "whatever's in there, it's not your fault, okay? I just need to know if anyone asked you to carry something you didn't understand." The girl looked up, her mouth opened, finally, but instead of speaking, she simply pointed to the bag. Then she dropped her hand again. The technician paused. Anya nodded. "Proceed, carefully." The UV light still bathed the space in unnatural blue. The containment tray had arrived, wheeled in by a suited officer who gave no acknowledgement to anyone but Anya. They were past questions now, it was time for answers. The air inside the room was starting to compress under its own weight. Anya could feel it pressing against her skin, the tightness in her chest no longer just instinctual but chemical, the kind of pressure that signals something about to break. The technician had peeled back enough lining to expose a sealed, metallic inner panel embedded into the base of the backpack, shielded and unfamiliar. No commercial tag, no sign of origin. He was about to cut through when Anya raised a hand. Her eyes shifted back to Ellie. "Sweetheart, we're going to open the hidden layer now. You don't have to watch. Would you like to step outside with Officer Lena?" Ellie didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. Her gaze was fixed on the backpack, unmoving, as if the object had its own gravity field holding her in place. Elia turned her attention to Vaughn. "Sir, I need your cooperation. We're opening the lining under federal protocol. You can remain here to observe or wait outside. Your choice." That's when Vaughn snapped. His voice, so carefully modulated until now, shot up like a crack in pavement under pressure. "I refuse," he barked, grabbing Ellie's hand so tightly her fingers bent backward. "You don't have a warrant, I know my rights. You can't open private property without judicial authority." The sudden volume made even the officers behind him shift. The technician froze mid-mashing. Ellie's head jerked slightly at the force of his grip, but she didn't cry out. Her body went stiff, small and taut like a coil compressed too long. "Let go of her hand," Anya said, her voice even but with a steel edge she hadn't used yet today. Vaughn's other hand hovered near the table, as if considering grabbing the bag. "I'll take her and go. You've overstepped. You're not going anywhere," Anya snapped back. "Inspection continues under Homeland Security jurisdiction." Vaughn's lips pulled into something between a grimace and a grin. "This is unlawful search," he muttered, eyes darting toward the corners of the room, weighing odds and exits. That's when Shadow, who had been silent since his last sniff near the bag, suddenly rose to full height. He took exactly 3 deliberate steps backward, paws clacking quietly on the linoleum floor. Then he barked. Once, then again, then a third time. All short, all sharp. Anya's blood chilled. She turned toward the officers instantly. Code Amber. Level 2 signal confirmed. The 3-bark pattern was drilled into every canine handler's memory. It was the highest level non-explosive biological threat alert that Shadow had been trained to give, used only when a human substance of unknown threat was detected and potentially unstable. Not drugs, not chemicals, something worse. The officer closest to Vaughn moved subtly, hand near his sidearm, not drawing but tensing. "Sir," released the child's hand. Vaughn's breathing had become erratic, his chest rising in shallow bursts. "It's not what you think," he said, but the way his grip tightened again on Ellie's wrist betrayed him. Anya took a step closer, angled slightly to cut off his path to the door. "Then help us understand what it is. You're scaring her." Ellie was no longer just silent. She was staring not at Vaughn, not at Anya, but at Shadow. The dog, eyes trained with surgical precision on the bag, didn't move. His entire body had entered a kind of quivering tension, the one Anya had only seen during high-pressure field operations. He was waiting for a command, but his body was already answering the question they hadn't asked out loud. "Danger confirmed." Anya looked at the technician. "Step back. Now." He did, lifting his tools away from the bag and backing toward the wall. "We need biological containment protocol in this room in 5 minutes," she said into her radio. "Get the hazmat team ready, secure the corridor." Vaughn's head snapped up. "Hazmat?" His voice cracked, disbelief curdling into panic. "You don't understand. It's temperature sensitive. You open it wrong, you'll ruin everything." Anya locked eyes with him. "What is it?" "Research," he said, too fast. "Samples. Nothing harmful if handled correctly. You'll destroy it if you overreact. You've just confirmed unauthorized transport of sensitive biological materials across international lines," Anya stated calmly. "That alone is a federal crime." Vaughn looked down at Ellie, whose arm he still hadn't released. The girl didn't pull away, but her lower lip had started to tremble. She wasn't fighting him, she was waiting. For something. For someone. Anya softened her voice again. "Ellie, if you want to come to me, just blink. You don't have to say a word, just blink." The girl's head didn't move, but she blinked once, then again, and then, as if gathering wind in her chest, she whispered. Vaughn turned toward her sharply, but before he could speak, one of the officers stepped in. "Let go of the child now." His tone left no room for misunderstanding. Vaughn hesitated, then released her hand. Ellie stepped backward, slowly like a deer exiting a clearing. She moved toward Shadow, who hadn't flinched the entire time, and placed her small hand on his head. The dog leaned into it, just slightly. "Secure him," Anya ordered. Vaughn didn't resist, not fully. But the moment the cuffs snapped around his wrists, his expression changed. Not to fear, not quite, but to something cold and bitter. "The bag's safer sealed. You open it wrong, and the exposure won't be contained." Anya didn't answer. Her eyes were already on the UV reactive stitching, the exposed panel, and the single blink Ellie had given. Shadow remained alert, tail stiff, eyes locked on the thing no one yet dared to touch. By the time Vaughn was escorted out of the room and into a holding chamber down the corridor, the full biosecurity team had assembled in the adjacent hallway. The atmosphere turned clinical and charged, a shift from suspicion to procedural urgency. Anya stayed with Ellie as the girl was led gently by a female officer to a quieter interview space, accompanied of course by Shadow, who refused to leave her side. It wasn't a question. The moment they tried to separate him, Ellie had flinched so visibly that Anya stepped in. "He stays," she said simply, and no one argued. In the private interview room, a soft light filtered through a narrow window, and Ellie curled into the corner of a padded bench, legs tucked under her, clutching Shadow's fur like a lifeline. For a long time, she said nothing. The officers gave her space. Anya crouched nearby but didn't speak. Instead, she watched the girl's breathing, how it slowed slightly when Shadow exhaled beside her. Then, finally, Ellie leaned in and whispered something directly into Shadow's ear. The words were almost inaudible, but Annie caught them, or enough of them to piece the rest together. "It's in the bottom layer. He told me never to open it, even if I got scared." Shadow's ear twitched, and he turned his head slightly to nuzzle Ellie's arm. Anya moved closer, voice soft but direct. "Ellie, thank you. You're doing so well. We'll take care of it, I promise. You're safe now." Ellie didn't speak again, but she didn't pull away when the officer offered her a warm blanket and a small stuffed animal from the comfort kit. It wasn't much, but it was something. Meanwhile, back in the inspection room, the containment team was fully suited, white Tyvek suits, filtered respirators, double gloves, and the backpack had been moved to a reinforced stainless steel tray under a containment hood. The technician who had first noted the UV reactive stitching now led the careful dissection of the base panel. Every move was recorded on 3 angles of video, every incision marked and timed. The lining peeled back, inch by inch, revealing not foam or reinforcement material, but a recessed cavity lined with thermal fabric. Embedded within that layer was a rectangular object, metallic, dull silver, scratched on the surface as if it had been handled without care. No locks, no hinges. It had been sealed by some form of industrial welding along the seam edges. The label, barely visible under the residue of friction and time, read, "No logos, no manufacturer, no country of origin." Just that sterile designation printed in black stencil font across the top. The technician glanced up through the hood glass at Anya, who stood behind the observation barrier now, her hands flat on the glass. "You commercial markings," he said through the mic. "Sealed container, heat welded. That's not for shipping consumer goods." "AB, what does that mean?" someone asked behind her. Anya didn't look back. "It's not a standard classification. Could be internal, military, private research, or something," Black added. "You think it's medical?" the hazmat supervisor asked. "Possibly," she answered. "But if it were legal, it wouldn't be here, like this." The technician gently rotated the object under the camera. Its edges were smooth, beveled, and slightly tapered like a compact lab-grade storage box. The thermal insulation surrounding it suggested temperature sensitivity, materials that required cold chain management. Biologicals, vaccines, or more likely pathogens. A second label, smaller, was partially scraped off, but one line remained, "Handle under class." That was all Anya needed to hear. Shadow, still seated beside Ellie in the other room, perked up, as if sensing the escalation through walls. "We're preparing for remote X-ray scan," the tech confirmed. "We'll need isolation lockdown for the next 10 minutes. Anya nodded. "Do it. Full spectrum. I want to know what's inside before anyone opens it." From the adjacent control room, the X-ray operator powered up the imaging unit, sliding the sealed container under a focused beam array. The display flickered to life on the monitor, gradually illuminating the contents in shades of soft gray and white. Inside the box were rows, 3, maybe 4, of cylindrical glass vials, held in molded foam slots. Each vial was small, finger-length, and stoppered with lab-sealed aluminum caps. No digital tags, no batch barcodes, just handwriting scrawled along the side of each label in different languages: Arabic, Cyrillic, Latin. And across the foam tray, 3 symbols appeared repeatedly. The most recognizable was the International Biohazard sign, faint but unmistakable. Another was a simplified molecular structure, likely referencing viral composition. The third was a number, or possibly a code, 143-Q. Anya's stomach dropped. Freeze frame, zoom in on that vial, the image sharpened. The color of ashwal, the kind of suspension used for cryopreserved samples or high-end cultures. "That's not research material," the technician whispered. "That's deployment grade. The kind you'd smuggle across a border, not study in a lab." Anya didn't flinch. "Has CDC been contacted?" "They're en route. So is Biosecurity Command." Shadow shifted again in the other room. his tail tapping lightly against the floor as Ellie stroked it with one hand. She hadn't moved otherwise. But Anya could sense the slow, uncoiling tension in her frame, like a breath she'd held since the beginning of this nightmare had finally begun to release. Back in the chamber, the technician initiated the second scan. Chemical residue. One of the vials registered trace evidence of stabilizing agent similar to those used in long-term pathogen storage. That confirmed it. The label might be unofficial, but the contents were designed to last. Anya turned to the supervising officer. Secure the chain of custody. Prepare the isolation case. Nobody touched that box without triple clearance from CDC and Federal 10D command. She paused, then added, "We've got a level 2 incident, and I think it's just the surface." The corridor outside the isolation bay now bore the silent tension of a place holding its breath. Lights had dimmed to reduce heat, and the containment unit had been triple sealed under reinforced shields before being transferred to a mobile biohazard vehicle. Inside the incident command center hastily assembled on the second floor of the airport, 3 agency teams clustered around a central screen displaying the X-ray scan and preliminary biological profile result. Anya stood between a Homeland Security agent and a CDC virologist, her arms folded tightly against her chest, eyes fixed on the data. "We've completed the initial genomic analysis," the virologist reported, scrolling through the molecular profile of the first extracted sample. 6 vials, each slightly different but all derived from the same structural base. "We've matched them to a highly modified strain of avian influenza, specifically H5N6 lineage, but with engineered sequences." Anya didn't speak. The virologist continued, her tone shifting from analytical to grim. "It's been altered to increase heat stability. That's not naturally occurring. It's designed to survive longer in transit, possibly airborne conditions." "Is it lethal?" the Homeland agent asked. "It depends," the virologist said. But with just a few tweaks, or in the hands of someone who knows how to deploy it, it could be catastrophic." She paused. "It's not just a lab sample. This was field prepared, and it wasn't meant to stay in that bag forever." A silence settled over the room. Then another officer entered, holding a thin red folder stamped with federal markings. "We've confirmed ID on the subject. He's not Daniel Cross." Anya turned. "Real name? Leon Brandt," the officer said. "Born in Luxembourg. Dual passports, French and Belizean. Last known residence is flagged as inactive, but he's been on the move non-stop. 5 countries in the past 12 months. Turkey, Russia, Laos, Panama, and Germany. Traveled under 4 different identities." "What about Ellie?" Anya asked, her tone tightening. "New records connecting them. Brandt has no children registered under any known alias. He never declared dependents. No adoptions. No legal guardianship anywhere. We ran global checks." "So who is she?" Anya demanded. "Still matching, but based on facial scans and local missing persons reports, we might have a lead. A girl named Elina Moritz disappeared in northern Sweden 8 months ago. Age 8. Case went cold after the first 2 weeks. Her mother died in a hiking accident the year before. Father's identity was never confirmed. She'd been in foster care, then vanished after leaving school one afternoon. The facial match is 86%, and we're waiting on dental records to confirm." Anya looked away for a moment, her hands tightening into fists. She replayed the image of Ellie, no Elina, whispering to Shadow, her voice barely more than breath. She hadn't just been carrying that box. She'd been trained not to open it. Groomed, maybe, controlled. "Why would he use a child?" one of the agents muttered. "Why not just ship it another way?" "Because children attract less suspicion," Anya said coldly, "especially when they're quiet, obedient, disguised under pink unicorns and fuzzy keychains. We're trained to overlook innocence." He knew that. She stepped toward the screen again. "Any indication how close they got to boarding?" "Boarding pass was valid," another officer answered. "Flight to Gothenburg. Gate was mismatched though. They were sitting near G15 but the flight departs from G29. That inconsistency is what flagged the first alert." "They were either early or stalling," Anya muttered. "Either way, he had a plan." Back in the secure room, Ellie sat quietly now, her eyes tracing the pattern of Shadow's fur as he rested beside her. The child psychologist had entered a few minutes earlier, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes and a practiced patience. But Ellie hadn't said a word to him. She only touched Shadow's ear again, the same way she had in the inspection room. Anya entered silently, crouched at eye level. "We found what you warned us about," she said gently. "He was very dangerous. You helped stop something bad, Elena." The girl flinched slightly at the name. Not denial, not fear, just the way someone responds when they hear something they haven't heard in a long time. A name that once belonged to them, before someone told them to forget it. "Do you know who he really was?" Anya asked. Ellie blinked. Then, barely audible, "He said his name was Leo. I wasn't allowed to call him Dad, just Leo." That was enough. Anya stood and walked out, closing the door quietly behind her. Down the hall, Leon Brandt sat under bright lights in the interrogation cell. His wrists were cuffed to the table, but his posture was relaxed, one leg crossed over the other. "She talk yet?" he asked as Anya entered. "You're going to prison," she replied. "Maybe for the rest of your life. Maybe longer if we link this to the Stockholm lab breach last spring." "You have nothing," Brandt said smoothly. "A box with unlabeled vials. A child I rescued from a country that didn't want her. That's all you'll prove." "We don't need to prove it to you," Anya replied. "We only need to prove it to the court." She leaned in, voice low. "And I promise you, by the time we're done, your name won't just be Leon Brandt, it'll be suspect number 1 in a biocriminal case that spans half the globe." Brandt didn't answer, but his eyes flicked, just for a second, toward the security camera in the corner. A tick, a mistake, while Leon Brandt sat unmoved behind the mirrored glass of an isolated holding cell. Far from the bustle of the investigation wing, a different kind of urgency was rising in the background. Anya had barely returned to her desk when a message pinged across the secure internal network. It wasn't flagged as high priority, but the keywords in the header were unmistakable. "Missing child, free Maryland." Her pulse ticked upward before she even clicked it open. The details were chilling in their simplicity. Ellie, or rather Elena Moritz, wasn't the only child who had disappeared in recent months. 2 other cases had emerged in the eastern region of Yorkshire, both involving girls between the ages of 8 and 10. Both gone without trace within a 6-day window. One had vanished from a supermarket parking lot while walking to the car with her foster mother. The other had simply never returned home from a school field trip. No ransom, no sightings, no clear leads. 7 days ago, the British National Child Protection Agency had issued a quiet, internal alert, suspecting a potential trafficking link. Interpol had flagged it under Category 9, unconfirmed cross-border movement. It had barely surfaced above the noise of daily operations. Until now, Anya immediately routed the data to the Joint Investigative Team and requested a full cross-ref between the other cases and Brandt's travel logs. Within minutes, a junior analyst pinged back. Leon Brandt had entered the UK under the alias Pierre Ludlow precisely 13 days ago. Flight manifest showed him arriving at Heathrow with a minor listed as dependent. First name, Abraham. Anya's chest tightened. There was no Emily among the 3 missing girls. But passports lie. Names can be changed, faces obscured. DNA couldn't. She called the lab and ordered a rush sequence on Ellie's genetic material against the samples archived from the open cases. They'd know within hours. Meanwhile, upstairs, the soft room where Ellie remained with Shadow took on a new tone. The psychologist had stepped out to update Anya, and now Ellie sat alone with the dog, who had curled protectively around her feet. She ran her fingers slowly along his ears, then whispered something as if to herself. Anya, just outside the glass, paused mid-step. The audio mic captured it. "You remember this smell? When I was in the warehouse, there was a dog just like him, but it was barking a lot. It was scared." Anya pushed open the door without hesitation. "Ellie," she said gently, "can you tell me more about that warehouse?" The girl looked up, startled. Her hands reflexively clutched Shadow's fur. "It was before the airport," she said, voice cautious. "Leo said it was a stopover, a transfer station. But it was cold, and there were boxes, and other people, kids too. But I didn't talk to them. Were there dogs there?" Annie asked, crouching again. "Security dogs," Ellie nodded. "One looked like him, but older. It kept barking. Then it stopped. I think someone took it away. Do you remember where the warehouse was? Anything you saw out the window? The girl shook her head. Only trees. And a big blue gate with numbers 2, 1, 8. But maybe I dreamed that part. Anya stood, her mind racing. The blue gate, the barking dog, a cold building that served as a staging point. It all pointed to a logistics hub, likely repurposed for covert transit. She immediately called the customs enforcement team, pull satellite and drone imagery of industrial sites in West Yorkshire and Midlands. Look for any compounds with the code 218 on outer structures. Include former courier depots and closed down textile mills. The response came back within 20 minutes. One site, just outside Leeds, matched. An old freight warehouse, shut down 5 years ago but with suspicious nighttime activity logged by a local drone hobbyist 2 weeks ago. Faint thermal readings had been dismissed as squatters or minor trespassing. Anya ordered a full tactical sweep. 2 hours later, ground teams breached the warehouse. What they found would haunt the reports for weeks. A makeshift holding area with reinforced doors, children's clothing tucked under dusty cots, old snack wrappers bearing recent expiry dates and surveillance cameras wired to an off-site system that had since gone cold. No people remained, no children. But the forensic team recovered DNA from at least 4 individuals under the age of 12. It matched 3 missing persons reports, including Ellie's. It also matched a 4th, unfiled profile now under investigation. In one corner of the warehouse was a plastic kennel, empty, broken in one corner with a tattered collar reading Max. A Belgian Malinois, according to a nearby crate log. Shadow paced beside Anya as she examined the photos transmitted from the scene. He growled softly at the image of the broken kennel. She laid a hand on his head. "We're getting closer," she whispered. Back at the airport facility, Ellie had been moved to a more comfortable setting. A representative from Child Protection Services had arrived, and arrangements were being made to fly her home to Sweden under diplomatic escort. The Swedish embassy had already confirmed her identity, based on dental records and a birthmark above her left shoulder. But Ellie remained quiet, emotionally suspended somewhere between relief and confusion. It wasn't until Shadow entered the room again that she smiled. "He found me," she said softly to the social worker. "Everyone else was looking, but he's the one who found me." In the briefing room, Interpol liaison officers joined the digital call. They confirmed Leon Brandt had traveled previously through airports in Prague, Lyon, and Tallinn, all of which had recorded similar near-miss anomalies with suspicious minors and incomplete baggage checks. "He's a carrier," one agent concluded. "He moves the children. But he's not the buyer, there's a network." Anya said nothing. She didn't need speculation. She needed proof, and the next step lay in extracting every shred of data from Brandt's confiscated electronics. A laptop, a burner phone, and a single USB, still encrypted, found sewn into the heel of one of Ellie's sneakers. The news came quietly, without any of the urgency that had characterized the previous days. A secure message landed in Anya's inbox just past 7 a.m. on a foggy Tuesday morning. DNA confirmation match finalized, parental rights verified, flight manifest authorized. Scarborough PD to receive child with embassy escort. Elena Moritz was finally going home. Not to a shelter, not to a facility, but home. Her mother, Lydia Moritz, had been located 2 days earlier through a social worker's tenacious digging. A night shift nurse at Scarborough General, Lydia had filed a missing persons report nearly 3 months ago after her daughter disappeared during a supervised transfer between foster homes. She had never stopped working, never stopped checking in, but after weeks of silence and no ransom demand, local authorities had quietly downgraded the case. Lydia had refused to accept it. She wouldn't just leave, she had told them. "Elena knows better. She knows I'd find her." But even the most determined hearts get tired. Lydia had begun packing away Elena's drawings, folded up her favorite blanket, set aside the birthday cake mix she'd bought, just in case. And then the call had come. Her daughter was alive, safe, recovered in an airport 2 countries away thanks to a canine unit and a handler who trusted instinct over procedure. Lydia had barely slept since. Anya stood in the observation lounge as the private flight taxied toward the terminal. Shadow sat at her side, his posture alert but calm. He had been with her every day since the investigation began, and she could sense something in his stillness today, like he understood the weight of this moment. Down the corridor, a slender figure stepped off the stairwell from the tarmac. Lydia, pale, slightly trembling, eyes wide with searching disbelief. Ellie exited moments later, her small hand held loosely by a child services escort. For half a second, they froze. Then Ellie ran. No hesitation, no fear, just full, silent momentum. Lydia collapsed to her knees and caught her daughter mid-stride, arms wrapping around the girl so tightly it looked like she'd never let go again. The entire lounge fell into a hush. No cameras, no applause, just the sound of a mother's breath catching in her throat, and a child finally letting herself sob into the safety of home. Shadow didn't move, but his head tilted just slightly, watching, understanding. Later that afternoon, after debriefings and final document sign-offs, Anya returned to the canine locker area to store Shadow's vest and equipment. The room was quiet, filled with the soft hum of air conditioning and the smell of leather and cleaning solution. She opened her locker to slide his water bowl inside and stopped. Taped to the inside door was a folded piece of notebook paper, child-sized, lined with crayon drawings in the corner. In the center, a scribbled image of a dog with oversized ears, big dark eyes, and a purple collar. The caption underneath, written in a careful, wobbly hand, read, "To Shadow the dog who speaks with his eyes." No signature. But she didn't need one. Anya blinked quickly and folded the note once before, sliding it into the small envelope where she kept her old academy ID. A note from her first field partner, and now this. She turned back to Shadow, who had already curled up on the blanket near her bench. He looked up briefly, then let out a soft huff and rested his head on his paws. In the days that followed, no major news outlets ran the full story. There were rumors of an airport lockdown in central Germany, a delay that impacted 3 outbound flights, vague mentions of technical irregularities and routine biosafety training, no mention of the samples, no mention of Ellie, or of Leon Brandt, who now faced international charges under at least 4 aliases, and whose encrypted USB had unlocked a trail of safe houses, encrypted shipping routes, and confirmed links to 3 known trafficking rings. There were enough cases to keep Interpol working for months, but there would be no press conference for Shadow, no glossy magazine profile, no viral photo of a heroic dog. Anya did. That was never the point. Every shift afterward, Shadow still rose early, still sat calmly by the door until she laced her boots, still walked the terminal with that steady, scanning gaze, pausing just a little longer now when passing children with brightly colored backpacks. Anya noticed, but she didn't comment. Some instincts don't fade. Some memories lodge themselves into the bone. Occasionally, the handlers joked about giving Shadow a retirement medal or a toy shaped like a virus vial, but Anya never entertained it. He wasn't done yet. There were still people to protect, still whispers in the crowd, shadows in motion, and things no scanner could detect. And Shadow, quiet, unshakable Shadow, would always be listening. At the end of her shift a week later, Anya passed through the staff corridor near the cafeteria where the maintenance crew had repainted the wall. Ellie's drawing had been removed during cleaning. Anya hesitated, then reached into her pocket and pressed a copy she'd made into the small space behind her locker mirror, just in case. Not because she needed the reminder, but because some truths, however quiet, deserved to be remembered. The girl was safe. The samples were secured. The threat had passed. But the dog who saw what no one else could, he was still watching, still waiting, still ready. If this story moved you, consider liking and subscribing so more people can discover the quiet bravery of those who protect us from the shadows. What part of the story struck you the most? Was it Ellie's silent plea for help, or the way Shadow never looked away? And where in the world are you reading from? Leave a comment below. I'd truly love to know.